She was born into a small neighborhood where no one believed a young black girl could rise to lead a company one day. Her family did not have much money, but they had strong values. Her mother always told her, "Respect yourself no matter what. Never let anyone tell you that you don't belong." Those words became her shield as she grew up. From a young age, she loved books more than toys. While other children were playing outside, she would sit by the window with a notebook, writing down ideas, imagining businesses she could build one day. School was not easy for her. Some teachers doubted her, thinking she would not go far. Some classmates laughed at her clothes because they were not expensive. But she never let their words break her. Instead, she used their doubt as fuel. Every time someone underestimated her, she worked harder. She studied late at night, often by the light of a small lamp when the rest of the house was quiet. When she went to college, things did not get easier. She was often the only black woman in her business classes. Professors sometimes ignored her questions. Other students acted as if she did not belong in the room. But she kept showing up, sitting in the front, raising her hand and proving with her knowledge that she was more than worthy to be there. Slowly, people began to notice her determination. She won scholarships, awards, and even started a small side business to support herself through school. After graduation, the world of business was harsh. She applied for jobs at big firms, but many doors closed on her face. Some companies did not even call her back. Others interviewed her but never hired her. She felt the sting of rejection many times, but she did not give up. She remembered her mother's words and chose to build her own path instead of begging for a seat at someone else's table. That was when she decided to start her own company. In the beginning, it was nothing glamorous. She worked out of a tiny apartment using her living room as an office. She did everything herself: marketing, sales, accounting, and even delivering products. Sometimes she had no money to pay herself, but she made sure her small team always got their salaries on time. Her belief was simple: treat people with fairness and they will stay loyal. At first, investors laughed at her. They saw her as too young, too inexperienced, and above all, too different from the image of a typical CEO they were used to. Older white men in suits. But she kept pitching her ideas. She walked into boardrooms with nothing but a confident voice and a heart full of courage. Some laughed at her, but a few listened, and those few became the start of her empire. Her company slowly grew. Clients began to trust her because she always delivered more than she promised. She worked long hours, sometimes 20-hour days, to make sure every detail was perfect. People admired her passion. Journalists began writing about the young black woman CEO who was shaking up the industry. For many who had never seen someone like her in that role, she became a symbol of hope. As her company expanded, she faced more challenges. Competitors tried to crush her by spreading lies. Some even copied her ideas. But every time they tried to push her down, she came back stronger. She learned how to fight in the business world with both wisdom and dignity. She refused to play dirty, but she also refused to be defeated. What made her special was not just her intelligence, it was her heart. She remembered the struggles of her own childhood and gave back to her community. She built programs for young girls who wanted to study business. She funded scholarships for students from poor neighborhoods. She believed her success was not complete if she did not open doors for others behind her. Soon, magazines began putting her on their covers. Headlines called her the rising star of business, but she never let fame get to her head. She still walked into her office every morning with the same humble smile. She still greeted her employees by name. She still carried the notebook she had as a girl, writing down ideas, dreams, and plans for the future. Her journey was not about luck. It was about persistence, faith, and courage. She had faced prejudice, rejection, and countless failures. Yet she turned all of it into stepping stones. By the time she reached the level of negotiating billion-dollar deals, she had already survived storms that would have broken many others. Everyone who met her could feel her energy. She carried herself with quiet strength. She did not shout to prove her worth. She let her work speak louder than words. People began to admire not just her business success, but also the way she carried her dignity. She had become proof that no matter where you come from, no matter what others say, you can rise and shine. That was why she was called the Rising Star. Not because she was handed power, but because she fought for it every single day. She earned her place in history through sweat, tears, and an unbreakable spirit. And as the world watched her climb higher, no one could have guessed that her biggest test was yet to come. one that would shake her to the core and prove how much her dignity truly meant to her. For years she had been climbing, step by step, building her company brick by brick. Now she was standing at the edge of the biggest moment of her career, a deal so massive that newspapers were already whispering about it. $500 million, $500 million, the kind of number that could change not only her company's future, but also her own legacy forever. The deal was with one of the richest families in the country, a white billionaire dynasty known for their old money, their private jets, their luxury estates, and their power that stretched across industries. People feared them as much as they respected them. They were the kind of family who could make or break entire corporations with a single signature. And now they wanted her. They wanted her company. It was strange to think about. Not too long ago, she had been running her business from her living room, answering emails while sitting at a second-hand desk. Now those same hands were signing papers worth millions. And soon, she would be holding a pen to finalize one of the largest contracts of her career. Her advisors told her this was destiny. This deal will put your company on the global map, they said. No one will ever question your power again. She nodded, but inside she felt something heavier. This wasn't just business. This was history. A black woman CEO, negotiating eye to eye with one of the oldest and wealthiest white families in America. For some, it was unthinkable. For her, it was proof of everything she had fought for. Meetings stretched for weeks. Every clause was studied, every condition weighed. The billionaire family's lawyers tried to push hard, but she was sharper. She didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She spoke with calm authority, matching their energy at every turn. In those boardrooms filled with suits and expensive watches, her presence was electric. She reminded everyone that she was not there as a guest. She was there as an equal. The media followed the story closely. Headlines flashed. Black woman CEO nears record-breaking deal. Interviews poured in, but she stayed quiet. She wanted the papers to talk, not her. She had learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than noise. Then came the invitation. Before the final signing, the family requested her presence at their private estate. A celebration, they called it. A show of unity, a display of power. It would be covered by journalists, investors, and other executives. To the outside world, it looked like a glamorous prelude to the signing of the century. To her, it was another test. She knew this family was known for more than wealth. They were known for pride, for arrogance, for treating outsiders like strangers. Still, she agreed to go. It was not fear that made her say yes, it was strategy. She wanted to look them in the eye, on their own ground, and prove that she was unshakable. The days leading up to the event were tense. Her staff prepared her speech, her wardrobe, her talking points. But deep down, she didn't care about appearances. She cared about one thing, respect. This deal to her was not just about $500 million. It was about walking into a room where no one expected her to belong and leaving with her head held higher than ever. When the night arrived, the estate glowed like something out of a dream. Chandeliers, marble floors, security at every corner. The family had spared no expense in showing off their wealth. Guests in expensive gowns and tailored tuxedos moved around with champagne glasses, whispering about the woman who had dared to rise this far. As she entered, all eyes turned. Some curious, some impressed, some skeptical. She walked with calm grace, her confidence filling the room. She was not dazzled by the gold or the glamour. She had seen too much of life to be shaken by glitter. This was the night before history. The night before pens would meet paper and headlines would change forever. Everyone expected her to smile, to laugh, to play along. But what no one knew was that beneath the sparkle of the estate, something dark was waiting. A moment of humiliation, carefully wrapped in polite words, would soon test the very core of who she was. For now, though, the world believed they were witnessing a fairy tale. A powerful black woman CEO about to seal a $500 million deal with a billionaire white family. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. Investors toasted. But only she knew the truth. This was not just business. This was a battle for respect, and the real war had not even begun. The invitation was more than a card, it was a message. Heavy cream paper stamped with a golden seal, delivered by hand to her office. The words were short and formal, but the meaning behind them was clear. Come to our world. Step into our circle. Prove you belong. She held it in her hand for a long time, Many people would have seen it as an honor. For her, it felt like a challenge. The billionaire family could have signed the deal quietly in a boardroom. They could have finalized everything over video calls or through lawyers. But instead, they wanted her at their estate, in their world, under their roof. It was not only about celebration, it was about power. Her advisors urged her to go. "It's tradition," one of them said. "This family does this before every big deal. It's their way of welcoming a partner." Another whispered, "You must go. This will show unity." She listened, but inside she was already preparing herself. She had been to enough rooms in her life to know that sometimes invitations were traps dressed up as kindness. The day of the event arrived with a stormy sky. Dark clouds hovered as her car drove through long country roads lined with tall iron gates. Security guards in tailored suits stopped every vehicle, their eyes sharp, their expressions cold. As her car passed, she looked out the window at the vast estate. Mansions stretched across acres of land. Gardens sculpted like artwork. Statues of men who had built their fortune generations ago stood tall, as if watching every guest who dared to enter. When she stepped out, flashes from cameras lit the air. Journalists were already gathered at the gates shouting questions. Is this the biggest deal of your career? How does it feel to partner with one of the most powerful families in America? She smiled politely but did not answer. She had learned that silence often carried more weight than words. Inside the mansion gleamed. Chandeliers sparkled like captured stars. Floors shined like mirrors. Wealth was everywhere, in the paintings, the silver trays, the expensive perfumes that floated through the air. Guests in designer gowns and sharp tuxedos turned their heads when she walked in. Some stared with curiosity, others with doubt. Whispers followed her like shadows. There she is. That's the one. The CEO. But some whispers carried another tone, sharp, dismissive. She's too young. $500 million. With her? Let's see how long she lasts. She kept her head high. She walked with quiet confidence, every step steady. She did not wear the loudest dress or the brightest jewels. She did not need to. Her presence was enough. The family greeted her with wide smiles, their words smooth like silk. But their eyes told another story, measuring her, testing her, deciding how much respect she deserved. One of them kissed her hand. Another led her deeper into the glittering hall. "We are honored you are here," they said. But she could feel it, the hidden weight behind every word. The dinner was a grand show. Golden plates, crystal glasses, servants moving silently between tables. Toasts were made, stories were told. Cameras clicked. Laughter filled the air. On the surface, it looked perfect, like a scene from a fairy tale. But under the glitter, she sensed tension. Every joke seemed rehearsed, every smile too sharp. She noticed how some family members whispered to each other when she spoke. She noticed how certain investors looked at her not with respect but with amusement, as if waiting for her to stumble. And then, the moment came. A voice cut through the air, light but sharp, like the flick of a blade. "You must feel very lucky to be here tonight." The words were coated in sugar, spoken with a laugh, but the sting was unmistakable. Some at the table chuckled. Others lowered their eyes, pretending not to hear. But she heard it, and she knew it was no accident. The humiliation was small, almost hidden, but powerful enough to shift the air in the room. It was the first crack in the golden walls of the evening. She smiled faintly, her expression calm, but inside she felt the fire rise. She had been through too much in life to be broken by one sentence. Still, she knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The night continued with more laughter, more toasts, more subtle digs dressed as jokes. To the cameras, it looked like a celebration. To her, it felt like a test of how much she would endure for the sake of money and business. As the evening drew to a close, she left with the same calm expression she had worn when she entered. But her mind was not calm. She replayed every word, every laugh, every look. The deal was worth $500 million. But for the first time, she began to wonder, was it worth her dignity? The answer, she knew, was waiting for her in the morning. The night was meant to end with clinking glasses and polite applause. But fate had prepared something different. The long dining table stretched like a river of gold under crystal chandeliers. Silver cutlery reflected the warm glow of candlelight, and the air was heavy with the scent of roasted meat and expensive wine. Guests laughed at polished jokes while journalists in the corner scribbled notes. Every detail was crafted to show power and wealth. She sat near the center, surrounded by the family who had built empires out of steel, oil, and money. At first, the conversation was formal. Talk of markets, investments, the future of global business. She spoke with calm confidence, every answer measured, her voice steady. Some listened with interest, others with half-hidden smirks. It began with whispers, soft enough to pretend they were private, loud enough to sting. She talks well, for someone from her background. Imagine, this deal almost puts her on our level. Let's see if she lasts 5 years. She heard every word, but she did not flinch. She had faced worse in classrooms, in boardrooms, in interviews where doors had been slammed in her face. She had learned the art of silence, of waiting for the right moment. But tonight, the test was different. Tonight, the stage was larger. The audience was global. Then it came, the moment no one would forget. One of the family's elder sons, dressed in a dark suit with a careless smile, leaned back in his chair. He swirled his glass of wine slowly, watching her with eyes that did not see an equal but an outsider. And then, with a laugh that echoed across the table, he spoke. "Tell us," he said, "how does it feel to come from nothing and suddenly sit here in a place like this? You must feel very lucky." The words dropped heavy, like stones in water. For a second, silence wrapped the room. Forks paused midair. Some guests forced awkward smiles. Others looked away, pretending to be fascinated by their plates. And then, laughter erupted, from some of the family members, sharp and careless. It was not laughter shared with her, but laughter aimed at her. The insult was dressed as a question, wrapped in a smile, but it was humiliation all the same. The message was clear: you don't belong. You are here by chance, not by merit. You should be grateful. She sat still, her back straight, her face calm. Inside, the fire roared. Memories flashed. Her nights of study under a dim lamp. The rejections, the struggles, the endless hours she had fought to build her company. Luck had never been her path. Hard work, persistence, and dignity had been her weapons. For a moment, she considered answering. She could have cut him down with words sharper than any knife on that table. She could have reminded him that she was not there by chance. She was there because she had earned her place, deal by deal, contract by contract, in a world that had tried to shut her out. But she stayed silent. Not out of weakness, but out of strength. Because she knew something they didn't know. Tomorrow the pen would be in her hand. Tomorrow the final signature would rest on her choice. And dignity, once insulted, never forgets. The dinner went on, but the mood had shifted. To the cameras and journalists, it looked like a glittering evening, filled with laughter and unity. But beneath the sparkle, there was a scar now, a wound carved in the middle of the table. Some of the younger guests noticed her calm face and whispered, "She took that well." They thought her silence meant acceptance. They mistook her stillness for defeat. But they were wrong. When the plates were cleared and the final toast was made, she rose from her seat with grace. She thanked her hosts politely, her smile controlled, her voice steady. To anyone watching, she looked like the perfect guest, untouched by the poison slipped into the wine of words. But inside, she had already made her decision. That night, as she returned to her hotel suite, she stood by the window looking out at the dark horizon. The city lights glimmered like stars, but her eyes were not on them. She was thinking of her mother's voice, telling her long ago, "Respect yourself no matter what. Never let anyone tell you that you don't belong." The family thought they had shamed her. They thought their words had reduced her to silence. But in truth, they had awakened something else. A storm that was waiting for morning. And in the morning, the world would witness a decision so bold, so shocking, that no one in that golden dining hall would ever forget it. That night, when she returned to her hotel, the noise of the dinner still echoed in her ears. Laughter that wasn't laughter. Words that weren't questions but weapons. She closed the door behind her and finally let the silence of the room wrap around her. No cameras. No flashing lights. No eyes watching, waiting for her to break. Just silence. She took off her heels and placed them carefully on the carpet. She loosened her hair, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the city outside her window. The skyscrapers glowed against the night sky, tall and proud, symbols of ambition and power. And yet, at that moment, she didn't feel the pride of ambition. She felt the sting of insult, buried deep like a thorn under her skin. Her face had stayed calm at the table, her smile steady, her voice unshaken. But here alone, the weight of it all pressed down. The words replayed again and again. You must feel very lucky. Lucky. As if all her years of sacrifice were nothing more than a coin toss. As if her long nights studying, her days spent knocking on doors that never opened, her sleepless weeks building her company from scratch, all of it was luck. Her jaw tightened. Rage simmered inside her, but it was not the loud kind. It was not the kind that burned wild and reckless. No, this was a quiet rage, cold and sharp, like steel heating slowly in fire, waiting for the right moment to strike. She walked to her desk and pulled out the leather-bound notebook she carried everywhere. It was old now, filled with years of scribbles, plans, dreams. On the very first page, she had once written a line in her mother's handwriting. Respect yourself, no matter what. She ran her fingers across the faded words, and something inside her steadied. For years, she had swallowed insults, endured dismissive looks, and fought battles no one else could see. Each time she told herself it was the price of building something bigger. Each time she chose patience. But tonight the question burned. At what point does patience become surrender? At what point does silence become consent? She stood by the window again, her reflection looking back at her in the glass. She saw not just a woman. She saw the girl who had studied by a dim lamp when others slept. She saw the young graduate who walked into interviews where no one believed in her. She saw the CEO who had built an empire from nothing. Every version of her stared back, reminding her, you are not here because of luck. You are here because you earned it. The thought of the deal pressed on her mind. $500 million. The kind of deal that could change everything for her company, her employees, her future. Walking away would be unthinkable to most. People would call her foolish, reckless, emotional. But what would be left if she signed and swallowed the humiliation? What would remain of her pride, her example, her story? She imagined her employees reading the news, knowing what had been said about their leader. She imagined young girls watching her, thinking that power meant staying silent when insulted. The thought twisted her chest. No, that could not be her legacy. She poured herself a glass of water and sat back down, her notebook open in front of her. On a blank page she began to write. Not business notes this time, not financial projections or contracts, but words. Words that would shape her decision in the morning. Words that carried her fire, her pain, and her strength. Hours passed. The city outside grew quiet, but she did not sleep. Her pen moved slowly, carefully, as if each word carried the weight of history. By dawn her eyes were heavy, but her spirit felt sharp, unbreakable. The rage was still there, but it was no longer raw. It had become something else, resolve. The kind of resolve that no money could bend, no insult could erase. She stood once more at the window as the first light of morning stretched across the city. The golden glow touched the rooftops, and for the first time since the dinner she smiled. It was a quiet smile, a dangerous smile. The smile of someone who had made a decision. Tomorrow the family would expect her to sign. Tomorrow the world would expect a handshake, a photograph, a headline. But she had already written her own headline in her mind, and it was not the one they were waiting for. Morning arrived with a heavy sky, gray clouds stretching above the city. The billionaire family's estate was buzzing with preparations. Staff hurried in and out of the golden halls. Journalists set up their cameras outside the gates, ready to capture history. Inside, investors whispered eagerly. The air was electric, thick with expectation. Today was supposed to be the final chapter. The moment when signatures turned into headlines, when photographs of smiling faces confirmed a $500 million deal. Everyone believed the story was already written, but they didn't know that she had written a different ending the night before. She arrived in silence, her car pulling into the estate with smooth precision. Reporters shouted her name, flashing lights exploded around her. She wore no extravagant jewelry, no dress meant to dazzle. Instead, she wore simplicity, sharp lines, dark fabric, quiet elegance. It was a choice. She was not here to decorate their story. She was here to write her own. Inside, the family waited. They greeted her with wide smiles, their voices sugar-coated. "Welcome back," one said, his hand extended. Another laughed. "Today is a historic day." Their words floated on the air, but she heard only the echo of the night before. You must feel very lucky. The documents were ready. Thick papers bound neatly. Pens laid across the table. A deal worth $500 million, wealth, power, security, all waiting at the tip of her pen. Advisors on both sides leaned forward, eager to seal it. Cameras positioned themselves, ready to capture the moment. The world was watching. She walked slowly to the table, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She placed her hands gently on the edge of the papers, her eyes scanning the bold black letters. Everyone leaned closer. The room held its breath, but instead of signing, she straightened and looked up. Her eyes swept across the faces, investors, family members, advisors, journalists. Her voice when she spoke was calm and steady, but it cut through the air like glass breaking. "I will not be signing this deal." The room froze. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy, so sharp it could be heard in the racing of one's pulse. Then whispers erupted, confused and frantic. Cameras clicked in a frenzy. The family members blinked, stunned, their smiles stiffening into masks of disbelief. One of the younger sons leaned forward. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice low, almost a growl. She met his eyes without fear. "I built my company with dignity, with sweat, with sacrifices you will never understand. I will not sell it to people who think my place at this table is luck." Gasps rippled through the room. The journalists scribbled furiously, their cameras flashing faster. The family shifted in their seats, their polished calm cracking into fragments. Another tried to laugh it off. "Surely you don't mean this. $500 million. Think about what you're walking away from." Her voice rose slightly but still carried the weight of calm steel. "Money means nothing if it costs me my respect. No amount of wealth can erase the humiliation you tried to hand me last night. You thought I would take it quietly, but let me tell you something. My silence does not mean consent. My dignity is not for sale." Every word struck like thunder. The investors in the corner glanced at each other, some horrified, others secretly impressed. The journalist's pen scratched faster. The family sat stiff, unused to being defied, unused to hearing no. She stepped back from the table, her hands leaving the unsigned documents untouched. "You need me more than I need you," she said softly, but everyone heard it, and then, with steady steps, she turned and walked out. Cameras followed her, flashes blinding, questions flying. "Why did you cancel? What happens now? Are you walking away from $500 million?" She did not stop to answer. She did not need to. Her action had spoken louder than any explanation could. Outside the estate, the news exploded across headlines within minutes. Black woman CEO walks away from $500 million deal. Shocking rejection at billionaire estate. Social media roared. Some called her reckless. Others called her fearless. But all agreed. She had done the unthinkable. Back inside the estate, the family sat in silence, their pride wounded, their power challenged. They had expected her to bend, to smile, to take the money and swallow their insult. Instead, she had stood taller than all of them. That morning, she left with no contract, no handshake, no deal. But she carried something far more powerful. Her dignity, her pride, her unbroken spirit. And the world would remember that longer than any billion-dollar signature. The news spread faster than fire in dry grass. By noon, every major network had the story. Screens across the world lit up with the same headline. Black woman CEO walks away from $500 million deal. Anchors spoke with disbelief. She turned down $500 million, one said, shaking his head. Another called it the boldest business move of the decade. Some analysts predicted doom, whispering that her company would crumble without the deal. Others leaned forward with admiration, declaring that her act of defiance would change the face of corporate history. On social media, the reaction was electric. Millions of people who had never heard her name before suddenly knew her story. Hashtags exploded overnight. Videos of her calm announcement played again and again, shared by people across countries and languages. To some, she was reckless. To many, she was a hero. Messages flooded her company's inbox. Women wrote to her saying, "You gave me courage to stand up for myself at work." Young entrepreneurs said, "I thought power meant saying yes. You showed me it can also mean saying no." And from every corner of the world there came one echoing message: respect is priceless. But not everyone praised her. Business critics filled the air with sharp words. "She's emotional," they said. "She doesn't understand strategy." Headlines in certain papers called her arrogant, difficult, ungrateful. Some investors pulled away, afraid of the storm. For a brief moment, the world seemed divided, half applauding her bravery, half waiting for her fall. Through it all, she stayed calm. She refused interviews, refused to fan the fire. She knew silence would speak louder. Let them argue. Let them analyze. Her decision had already been made, and she did not need to explain it twice. Meanwhile, the billionaire family was reeling. In private, they raged. Deals had been lost before, but never like this. Never so publicly. Never so humiliatingly. Their reputation, polished for generations, now carried a stain. People whispered that their arrogance had cost them one of the most powerful partnerships in modern business. For once, they were not the ones writing the story. But her company? It did not collapse. It grew stronger. Competitors who had once ignored her now wanted to meet. Investors who admired courage stepped forward, offering new partnerships. Clients trusted her more, not less. They said, if she can walk away from $500 million, she must truly believe in what she's building. And perhaps the most powerful impact was invisible, felt not in boardrooms but in homes, in schools, in hearts. Young black girls saw her on TV and whispered to themselves, that could be me. Workers who had endured disrespect at jobs thought of her courage and decided they too could stand taller. Across the globe, her story became a symbol, not of money lost, but of dignity kept. Late one evening, as the frenzy of the day finally began to settle, she sat alone in her office. The city outside pulsed with lights, the same city that had watched her rise and now watched her roar. She opened her old notebook again, the one that carried her mother's words. She turned to the blank page where she had scribbled thoughts the night before canceling the deal. And with a quiet smile, she wrote a single line, respect over riches. That night, she realized something important. The deal had been about more than her. It had been about all those who watched, all those who doubted, all those who hoped. She had not just canceled a contract, she had ignited a conversation the world could not ignore. The aftermath was messy, full of praise and criticism, loss and gain. But at its core, it carried a truth she had always known. Dignity is worth more than dollars. And now the world knew it too. She leaned back in her chair, her face lit by the city lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new critics, new battles. But tonight she allowed herself to breathe. For the first time in years, she felt lighter. Not because of what she had gained, but because of what she had refused to lose. And outside, across screens, across headlines, across whispers in quiet rooms, the world kept repeating her story. The CEO who walked away. The woman who chose respect. The leader who shocked the billionaires. She had not just written a headline. She had written history. Months passed, but the story did not fade. What many thought would be a scandal quickly became something else, something larger, something unforgettable. Her refusal to sign the $500 million deal turned into a lesson studied in business schools. Professors debated it, students wrote essays about it, and leaders quoted her words in conferences. She had walked away from wealth, but she had gained something rarer: legacy. In the beginning, critics had predicted collapse. They said her company would not survive without the billionaire family's support. But they were wrong. The opposite happened. New partners appeared, eager to align with someone who valued respect over greed. Young entrepreneurs saw her as a role model and wanted to be part of her vision. Her company expanded into markets that once seemed unreachable, powered by trust rather than money. But her legacy was not just measured in contracts and profits. It was measured in people. In neighborhoods where children dreamed of becoming something more, her name was spoken with pride. In classrooms, teachers held her up as an example, proof that power can come from humility, and that courage can defeat arrogance. Women in boardrooms told her story to each other like a secret weapon, a reminder that they too could say no when disrespected. And always, her own community carried her like a banner. For too long they had seen doors closed, voices silenced, dignity traded for survival. But her act showed them a different path, that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from what you take, but from what you refuse to take. Meanwhile, the billionaire family's shine dimmed. They still had money, still had estates, still had their empire, but people remembered the humiliation more than the wealth. Every time they walked into a room, someone would whisper, "That's the family she walked away from." Power, once unquestioned, now carried the shadow of her defiance. And yet, she never gloated. She never mocked them. She never wasted her time looking backward. Her focus was forward, on her company, on her people, on the next generation who needed someone to clear the path. She built foundations for young women to start businesses. She funded schools in poor areas. She created programs that taught respect and leadership as strongly as numbers and strategy. Her message was always the same. Money will come and go, but your dignity is forever. Years later, when journalists wrote about her, they did not call her the woman who lost a $500 million deal. They called her the CEO who redefined success. They wrote that she had changed the rules, that she had proved walking away could be more powerful than signing on. In speeches, she told her story simply. I was tested, she would say, and I chose myself. And every time those words were spoken, audiences rose to their feet, applauding not just her strength but the truth behind it. Her mother, who had once whispered lessons in a small home, lived long enough to see her daughter's story written in books, shown on screens, told across nations. And when asked what made her proudest, the CEO always answered, that I did not forget who I was. The deal was gone. The money was gone. But her place in history was unshakable. She had become more than a business leader. She had become a symbol of courage, of dignity, of refusing to be bought. And so her legacy was written not in numbers, but in respect. Not in contracts, but in lives inspired. Not in the wealth she gained, but in the arrogance she refused. Generations later, when people told her story, they did not talk about the billionaire family. They did not talk about their estate, their chandeliers, their wealth. They talked about her, the black woman CEO who was shamed in public, but who stood taller than gold and chose dignity over $500 million. She had proven a truth that would never fade. Sometimes the most powerful word in business, in life, in history, is no.